Enough hair jumping, we're in 1864 solidly. We're May 30th, 1864. Now, at this time, the Union 2nd Corps is coming right down this road. Obviously, the house is in their line of advance. It's going to become part of whatever battle is here. Problem, the family's still there. So, well, I'll let them speak for themselves, I should say. You can imagine the weirdness of rolling up on this scene. This is an officer that was here. And you're going to hear a lot from him. But he says, Colonel Miles, that's Nelson Miles, a future general in the Army, Hallenbeck, Church, and myself passed through the large hall to the rear of the house. So he comes through this house, standing right there. Seeing no one till we got outside, where at the basement door, we found a group of 5 women and some children in the greatest conceivable terror, screaming and crying, and frantically beseeching us not to harm them. One, with a small child in her arms, held it up to me saying, "You will not harm my little darling, will you?" We succeeded after some time in soothing them with assurances that we would protect them instead of harming them, and got from them the information that it was the house of Mr. Shelton, who was away from home, and that Topopotymy Creek ran through the ravine just in front of us, and a large rebel force was on the other side of it. We then went upstairs, and from the windows, those windows, saw a large body of infantry, not more than 500 or 600 yards from us, lying with their guns stacked in front of the woods. But as soon as they discovered the extent of our line, they formed and withdrew into the edge of the woods, where they commenced entrenching. What do we mean when we say entrenching? Earthworks. You've seen you go to Cold Harbor, you've seen those earthworks that get behind and give them that kind of defense. Well, problem is, this family won't leave, and there's a pretty good reason for them being there. Turns out, the eldest daughter of these 5 women down there was about 9 months pregnant. So they refused to leave her, as you know, said that she was unable to move. Well, this is proving something of a problem now for the advancing Union troops, because this house is going to become the nexus of this battle, and we've got a family in there that's trying to tell us to go somewhere else. Towards evening, General Hancock came up to the house to get some information from the inmates and urged Miss Shelton to go to the rear with her family, or else go into the rebel line if they preferred. But they would not do either, preferring to stay at home, although we assured them that a battle would probably be fought here tomorrow. They consented, though, to remain in the basement, which had thick walls. And then he goes on to remark about the quality of the strawberries in the area. So that ordinary contrasted with the extraordinary. For this family, this must have been the worst day of their life. For Captain Robertson here, he's just interested in getting a nice bite to eat. So they're staying down in there. Hancock himself orders his staff officers to get involved and get them out of there. Now this is fun, because just yesterday, new discovery was made. This is the first time this has been read on the site since it was written and read by the Shelton women in 1864. This is really cool to me. It was found in the house. I told you how excited I am about this place, because unfortunately for them, but fortunately for us, the Sheltons were terrible pack rats. They kept every scrap of paper ever. They've got grocery receipts going back into the 1830s. It's fascinating. It's a peek into their life. But don't think that justifies being a pack rat. Throw yourself away. One of the things we found while going through these enormous stacks of paper, still tied with that red tape, was this letter written to the Shelton women that night from General Hancock. Madam, General Hancock presents his compliments to Mrs. Shelton. To ladies so brave as those who compose your family, he regrets to intrude his offers. But as the scenes of the day may be repeated in his aggravated form tomorrow, or even more so should the enemy not retire, he desires to express his willingness to afford all facilities for your leaving the advanced position in which our advance has placed you, and will take measures at once to secure your safe and comfortable transportation, should you be persuaded to retire out of the reach of the enemy's fire. The only fear the general has is that your house may be set on fire by shells. I remain, madam, with much respect, your obedient servant, Francis Walker, Lieutenant Colonel, Assistant Adjutant General. You think that's how he usually writes? Look at it, he really went to work on that. It's blank verse. It's so beautifully Victorian. Well, we have a pretty good idea of what the family thought about that. This is kind of funny. In reply to the letter was received an hour later a very courteous appeal from the ladies not to make their house the scene of conflict, stating that one of the members of the household was sick and could not well be moved, and requested that the Second Corps should take some other route. It being not altogether convenient to alter the plans of the Army of the Potomac at so short a notice, it was necessary to reply that the Second Corps could not well change its line of march, and that if they valued their lives, they would retire. I not only sent the ambulance a second time, but requested the able, humane medical director of the Corps, Dr. Doherty, to visit them and see that the sick member of the household suffered no harm. Dr. Doherty went, but speedily came back. He had pronounced the sick lady to be in a condition to move without the slightest danger. But his opinion had been received with indignation, not of the speechless variety. I myself received a letter in which the opinions of the household concerning the Congress, President, people, and Army of the United States were set forth with the utmost distinctness. The epistle closed with informing me that if any of the family were killed on the morrow, their blood would rest on my soul forevermore. Inasmuch as the only possible chance of their being injured was by shots from cannon manned by Confederates, it was difficult to apprehend the logic of this denunciation. The upshot was that the ladies, sick and well, stayed in the house, having moved down into the cellar. As our signal officers used the roof for purposes of observation, the Confederate cannoneers were particularly attentive to it. The house was repeatedly struck, but none of the family in the cellar were hurt. That roof was struck 51 times by Confederate artillery from across the creek. 51 times. And that's just the ones that hit. You just got to imagine all around us this boiling cauldron of shells exploding right and left. People dying right and left as Hancock prepares to assault across that creek. All happening right here. Within sight of the house was a mortar battery, lobbing mortar shells over the top. Also in this vicinity was an artillery battery itself, which we know about because one of the limber chests exploded. And why it exploded is sort of up in the air. The most common theory is that a nearby, this is funny, there's these tiny little details that suggest things. Somebody says, a slave woman ran out from the nearby slave quarters. Well, that tells us something, doesn't it? Somewhere over here are some slave quarters. She runs out from them with a pile of ashes, like right out of the, just taking them right out of the fireplace. You can dump them somewhere. Well, and she pitches them underneath the limber. Some said she opened up the lid and pitched it in the limber. Either way, that sucker blew up, killing 4 people right here in the yard. So this is not just some, oh, there's this big battle going on, there's lots of casualties. How about these 4 people right here, right within sight of where we are, dead because of some stupid accident. And the slave woman was unharmed. But isn't that interesting too? It tells us not only where the slave cabins were, but that the slaves are still here. Isn't that interesting? It's a major slaveholding household. So as the battle begins to broil and everything begins to get hot, the attack begins with its focus going right down there, trying to cross the creek and drive those Confederates out. And we'll talk about what happened next at our last stop. As I suggested, we're just going to walk right down this road. When we pass that edge of the house, we're going to be in 1864. Until then, I've got you telling this story. But these are all things I want you to think about because they all involve Hancock's Second Corps. And you're going to meet him. So I want you to think about what questions you might be asking him as we go on to talk about the battle. Any questions before we go on?
You think that slaves was intentional?
Yeah. I've got 5 different accounts of this. And every single one of them is different. Every single one. Some of them say she's crazed. She's crazy, she runs out screaming. Others say she deliberately walked up to the limber chest, picked it up, and pitched the things in. So it depends on who's seeing this or writing about it. I think it's one of those It happened, no doubt. Something happened that involved a slave and a limber and an explosion that killed people. That happened. Now, why or how that happened, I don't think we're ever going to know, because it's always washed through whoever's telling it. And I think it became kind of a fish story. Did you hear what happened the other day? It was the most incredible thing you ever saw. Hey, you guys got to hear this. You know, I think it takes on a life of its own as far as it's just, you know, one of these urban legends. So I don't think we're ever going to get close to the truth. And of course, we don't have anything from the slave women. You know, I decided to kill some Yankees today. You know, I just don't think it's ever going to happen. Love to though. Love to though. Unfortunately, slave memoirs and recollections are just. They're hard to find. They don't exist. Not for this side.
Yellow Tavern, is that about the same time?
Yellow Tavern has just happened. Yellow Tavern is Sheridan's raid trying to destroy the Confederate cavalry. Did a pretty good job at it, too. But it's also where Jeb Stuart was mortally wounded. If you know where that is, down here on Route 1, just north of, or just south of Virginia Center Commons. It's literally right there. Yeah. That's where Stuart was mortally wounded. Now, Sheridan could have theoretically gone in and occupied Richmond, but he's only got about 5,000 troopers. That's not enough to hold it. And so he wisely discerned, once he's basically done the men at Yellow Tavern, to get out. And that puts Lee in a strange position because he's still got cavalrymen, but who's going to command it? And at this point, the cavalry command is split between Wade Hampton and Fitzhugh Lee. It's definitely a problem for the Confederates. Yes, sir?
Did the house catch on fire at all from the 51
Apparently
shots?
not. Apparently not. That's the most amazing thing to me.
Yeah.
Which suggests also something that we've been trying to figure out. What was the roof back then?
Yeah. See,
it's 10 now. Right? You see how everything's up in the air? You're looking for these little details, trying to figure out what's what. Okay, it's 10 today. It was not 10 back then, I guarantee it. It was either slate or cedar shake. Now, if that thing's hit 51 times and it's cedar shake, what's going to happen to that roof? It's going to go up. So my guess is it was probably slate. But wisely, I think when we redo this, I think we're probably going to go with cedar shake because it's lighter. And it's not going to put that kind of burden on the structure that certainly slate roofs would. You get some snow on that thing, it's going down. So I think we're going with cedar shake. But my guess is, though nobody writes about it, it was probably slate.
Slate roof and brick
now,
wall.
A few more comments about what you're looking at. This back porch right here did not exist. This was put here in the 1940s or 50s. All right. So back then it would have had a fairly conventional porch, and of course some kind of wooden or slate roof. But the brick that you're looking at is historic. If you look close, you can see what I think are probably shell stripes that have been repaired. Look at the difference in the color of the brick. Look at how some of it is a little off center, like it's been knocked. Look at that thing, and I think what you're looking at there is the result of this battle. They pelted the roof 51 times. The house got hit too, and we know that, and we'll hear about that in our next time. Any other questions?
The cavalry engagement before this, so that didn't involve Stuart's?
Stuart is dead. He's been in his grave now for about 2 weeks. But the cavalry was involved there at Hall's shop, and they've been driven back right down this road. Along with that letter that I wrote you that we found yesterday, we also found, thank you, Colonel Shelton, for giving us the fodder for our horses as we retreated past your house. Huh. Colonel Shelton, the patriarch of this family, is not here. His women are in the basement. He was over there behind the Confederate lines. Imagine his horror as he watched those cannoneers unlimber and begin to shell his house, knowing his family's in the basement.
He knew his family was in?
Absolutely. He knew he was not here. The other interesting thing about that letter that I just read to you, it tells us where he was. It says, to Colonel Shelton at Lee Station. So he's behind the Confederate lines down there while this is happening. We have a Confederate account where he was running up to the cannoneers, please don't fire on my house, but they're like, the same as the Shelton women saying, you got to go some other way. Yeah, right. The Army's there. So here's this family literally torn and caught in this boiling cauldron of war. Just imagine that horror. Imagine that happening to you. And that's what's happening here. All right, before I get emotional, down the coast.